Welcome. Recently I came upon a book that's not especially new by Norman Fisher, Training in Compassion, and it's a Zen perspective on the practice of Lojong, which I've spoken on a little bit before. It's a Tibetan practice to cultivate compassion and wisdom, and there's 7 main points, then sort of broken down into 59 slogans or brief statements that are very kind of memorable that you can work with. So I wanted to talk about the first one. So the first point is resolve to begin. And those of us that have been practicing for a while, we can still resolve to begin the moment we wake up in the morning, for example. We can wake up and we can remind ourselves, that's right, I'm a practitioner. That's right. I want to be a skillful person. I want my life to be a life I can feel is dignified and beneficial. We can remind ourselves of that when we wake up in the morning, or any moment during the day. We can resolve to begin. And if we haven't started practicing until late in life, it doesn't matter. We can still resolve to begin. Wherever we are, whatever age we are, whatever place we are in our life, whatever mistakes we've made and harm that we may have caused, we can always resolve to begin. So just those 3 words, resolve to begin, can be very helpful to bring to mind at any moment, especially if it's a little bit of a moment of either feeling a little dejected in some way or confused. If we've been distracted and then we feel a little bit bad about that we've gone off on a... Sometimes, people's lives get very busy and their practice kind of slips into the background. They don't have time for Zazen and they forget about the teachings, not completely, but, just caught up in the busy things of life. You can notice that and suddenly go, oh, I can resolve to begin again. I'll begin now. It's never too late to begin. So then the first slogan that goes with this first point is to train in the preliminaries. And then the train in preliminaries is broken down into a number of points as well. It's often like this in Buddhist teachings. Lists and sub-lists and so on. But they can be very helpful for us. We can often just pluck one of them, we can just pluck it out because it resonates and we can think about it. So train in the preliminaries. The first part of training in the preliminaries is to know that we are in this moment the result of everything that's already happened. Here we are, all the various injustices that have occurred to us, all the unfortunate things that have happened to us, all the fortunate things that have happened to us, the privileges that we've had, the discriminations we've experienced, the particular idiosyncrasies of our particular life, the parents, the siblings, the class, the location, the events. Here we are, they are ours. These are the preliminary things we have to work with. Doesn't matter whose fault it is about these things. I mean, it maybe matters in the sense that it might be something there might be something to do, but in the end, it is our life, our experiences, and here we are. We're the one that breathes in, we're the one that breathes out, we're the one that has been impacted by all the things of our lives, and only we can take responsibility and work out what we're going to do with them. So that's the first part of training in the preliminaries, sort of to take stock. Because often I think what we do is we have lots of different aspects of our lives that we kind of push away and don't want to think about or have a lot of opinions about. And we can't just see them for what they are. We have trouble just saying, this is the fact of the matter. This is how it is. These are my skills, these are my shortcomings. These are the burdens that I carry. This is the legacy that I carry. These are the great advantages I've received. This is how it is. Beyond justice and injustice and fairness and unfairness. This is my life. This is what I've got. So it's kind of like a clear, sober recognition of our life as it is. It's part of training with the preliminaries, is to accept and see our life as it is. And that, of course, can be being done over and over and over. Because, we reframe our history all the time. As we practice more, we can sort of understand our history and our past in slightly more skillful ways. So we can kind of take stock repeatedly of our particular life. And of course do that with a feeling of care and respect and compassion for ourselves, that we're still alive, we're still here. We have somehow navigated all of that and miraculously have encountered the Dharma. The second part of training with the preliminaries is to have some kind of practice that involves quiet reflection. And so in our tradition, this is Zazen. A daily, quiet practice of some kind, whether it's sitting with the community for 30 minutes or 40 minutes each morning, or morning and evening, or if it's a practice that you just do yourself at home. Or sometimes people's practice more involves being able to go for a walk in their lunch break at work, for example, and just seeing if they can have a more open mind that's not cluttered by thoughts so much, just a mind where maybe you can look at the trees and look at the sky. Whatever kind of practice, this is part of training in the preliminaries, is to develop a practice. And in our tradition, we strongly advocate that we recognise that it is very beneficial to sit on a daily basis with a community whenever possible, with a Sangha. So finding a way to be still amidst the activity of life. There's a koan in the Diamond Sangha tradition that I'm also trained in, and the koan goes, everybody longs to leave the eternal flux. Everybody longs to leave the eternal flux. Not only to be in harmony, but to sit by the charcoal fire. So that first part, everybody longs to leave the eternal flux. The feeling that brings up for me is this tender sense that we all want to have some sort of quiet stillness amidst all of the activity. We all long for that. We can't actually leave the eternal flux. We're in it. We're part of the river. There is no getting out of it. But we do long to have some kind of peace and harmony. And that last part, to sit by the charcoal fire, we want to have this experience of peace and tranquility and stillness but still be there where the fire is, still be there with everybody else around the fire, still be there. So our daily Zazen practice is the way we can cultivate this kind of stillness of mind that we can carry with us throughout the activity of our day. So that's the second part of training in the preliminaries. The first, taking stock of our lives and taking full responsibility for our lives. Compassionately taking responsibility for our life where it is right now. And then being able to rest in stillness each day. And then the third part of training in the preliminaries is to contemplate these four truths. All these different... Contemplate these four truths. So I will go through them one at a time. And I'm going to read from Norman Fisher's book. So the four, these are four, they just said 4 points here, but I think in a way we could think these are 4 realities, these are 4 truths. These are really so. The first is the rarity and preciousness of human life. The second is the absolute inevitability of death. The third is the awesome and indelible power of our actions. And the fourth is the inescapability of suffering. So I'm actually really glad I came upon this point here, the rarity and preciousness of human life, because some of you may have been here a few weeks ago when I gave a talk. It was the talk about turtles all the way down. And in that talk, I said something that afterwards I thought, that doesn't quite accord with the Buddha's teaching. I just noticed that. What I said was, and it was an expression of sadness about the state of the world right now. I said something like, it's sad that there are over 8 million people with all the animals that we eat inhabiting this earth. Something like that I said. And what I was meaning is, it's so sad that we've destroyed so much of the natural world and all the various complex species, that we have damaged that biodiversity so much. So it was an expression of sadness. But I was also aware that what I said was a little unskillful, but it was too late. You say something. So then I came across this, so I want to read. How can we think of our life as precious, the human life as precious, when at this moment in history we are having, most people particularly in the first world or in the more developed world, are having such an enormous impact on the earth, such an adverse impact on the earth. So I want to read to you what Norman Fisher said. I was just so glad when I read it. I thought, this is what I needed to hear. And here he says 7 billion people, because this book was written in 2012. We're now, of course, over 8 billion. There are more than 7 billion human beings on planet Earth, and this seems like a lot, but maybe not. The Earth may contain 7 billion or so humans, but it also contains many other living creatures. For instance, every human body is host to trillions of living beings, various kinds of bacteria, mites, and other microscopic creatures that are, in their time and space scale, just as alive and just as vivid as we are in ours. Beyond these trillions, multiplied by 7 billion, who live in and on our bodies, there are, of course, many other larger creatures we can see and relate to. The number of ants alone in their various species is incomparably larger than 7 billion, not to mention all the other sorts of insects and other animals that exist in the air and water and on land. If you consider then the total number of non-human living beings on the earth, and could somehow relate that number though no doubt it is far too large to compute in any meaningful way, to the number of human beings, you would certainly see that human life on Earth is a very rare thing. You would have to pick over trillions upon trillions of living creatures before you would find one that was human. And this calculation only involves planet Earth, this tiny water and soil-laced planet spinning around a small star within a vast universe. Who knows how many other planets out there have life forms, or no life forms? Therefore, it is no exaggeration to say that human life is not only, as we would all agree anyway, precious and sacred and not to be taken lightly, it is also, in the grand scheme of things, unbelievably rare. Therefore, your living body is a fortunate, rare and precious gift, and your human mind, consciousness, risen to the point where there can be identity and value and thought and beauty and autonomous choice, is dear beyond compare. Having received this rare and precious gift, how is it that up to now you haven't thought about the best way and the highest way of fulfilling your human purpose? You haven't resolved to go beyond your self-centeredness and self-concern so that you can begin to manifest wisdom and compassion, or whatever you consider to be the highest of human purposes. Considering deeply the preciousness of human life, you feel inspired to begin and to do something more with this life. This is the first point to think about, and it is a pleasant and awesome thing to think about. So I'm really glad that I came across that, because I've had a little bit of difficulty with the traditional teaching of speaking of how precious the human life is, because I've been holding this sadness about what's been happening with our overconsumption on this earth. But hearing him speak about it this way, and really seeing how vast the number of living beings are, and therefore, even though it looks like there's a huge number of us, in fact we are still this rare thing. And what's different about humans, maybe not in an absolute sense, but there seems to not be very many other species that have got anywhere near, or maybe not so near, the degree of capacity to be aware of our own awareness, and therefore to really be able to decide what to do or what not to do in a very intentional way. We do seem to have that quality more so than most other species. And we also happen to have a body that can manipulate objects in a way that is different to other species. And so that means that we could be, and of course our ancestors were, fantastic custodians of the earth. We have this capacity to decide to be really beneficial, to make choices to be really beneficial, or to be really destructive. We can do both. So it is good to really contemplate, my goodness, I got born as a human. I got born as this one creature that has got this particular awesome capacity to do good or to do harm. And what am I going to do with this one precious life that I have right now, the life I'm in right now? Yeah, so the effect of this contemplating that it's precious to be born in a human life can really motivate us to not just waste time too much. I mean, it's good for us to waste a little bit of time in the sense of just to relax doing something that isn't especially beneficial or especially harmful. We all need to have that time of just being neutral and just letting our mind and body just really relax, doing nothing in particular. Nothing wrong with that. We don't want to do too much of it, because we have this precious, rare thing of being born a human. We can be a good custodian. And as Brian Cox points out, the astrophysicist, who's quite well known for his talks, we have this capacity to be conscious of the whole universe. We can be aware of it. And we might be the only conscious beings in the whole of the universe that can be aware of the universe itself and can witness it. That seems like a wonderful thing. So that's the first of these 4 points to contemplate as part of training in the preliminaries. And then, so it's a really kind of joyful one. The next 3 maybe don't sound quite so joyful, or the second and 4th one. Like, the next one is the absolute inevitability of death. At first, that sounds not terribly encouraging. So I'm just going to read a little more that he says here. The absolute inevitability of death. Most of us somehow believe that we are the sole exception to the otherwise universal rule that all living creatures die. We have seen others die, so we know that others die, and if asked, we will answer that yes, we do understand that we will die. But somehow, despite this, in our heart of hearts, in our thoughts and feelings, we don't really believe it. Yet the reality of death is the most important factor of every moment of our lives, because it's thanks to death that we can cross over from one moment to the next. If this moment doesn't die, totally disappearing, we can't have the next moment. So loss and death are facts of life every moment. But one day a moment will come like all others, but different in one respect. It will not be succeeded by another moment. Oh, she died. Oh, he died. People will then say. Oh, it's so funny. Oh, they're dead. They're dead. So this will happen to all of us. This will happen to all of us. It is a very good practice to contemplate dying. I contemplate my death a lot. I imagine all sorts of different ways that I'm going to die. Some of them are a little bit sort of romantic. I'm going to wander off into the forest, sit in meditation as the snow falls down upon my head, and then I'll die. It's one of my favourites. But of course, it might be just a car accident. It might be a sudden heart attack. It could be a long, slow, painful death in hospital with people around us, nurses and doctors and so on. So we should really contemplate the absolute inevitability of our death. Live our lives well, and live our lives well so we can die well. Hopefully die well. We still might go kicking and screaming. That's okay too. But it would be nice to be quite comfortable with our own death, quite well prepared for our own death, not shocked and surprised, like, I thought it wasn't going to happen to me. You know. Emotionally, a lot of us feel that it's not going to happen to us. So it's good to picture our own dying. Then the third one is the awesome and indelible power of our actions. Yeah, the awesome and indelible power of our actions. I think often it's very common for us to underestimate the impact we have on each other. You know, whether we pay attention when someone's talking to us, whether we have good eye contact with people when they're talking to us, whether we really listen properly, or whether we're already halfway out the door or halfway into preparing what we're going to say next. And every single thing we do has an effect. Hello. You're welcome to sit and join us if you want to. On a chair or on a cushion, just help yourself. So everything that we do has an effect. Every single thing we do. Positive, neutral, negative. And all the gradients in between. So we don't need to be panicky about our actions. We don't want to be over vigilant and super self-conscious about our actions. That's not the intention of realizing the awesome power of our actions. It's more just to be kind of aware, my goodness. Everything I say and do, and even everything I think, has an impact in some way. Therefore, I want to be sort of intentional as much as possible. Be thoughtful as much as possible. Be present, not distracted, as much as possible. And then the last one is the inevitability of suffering, or the inescapability of suffering. I'll just read a little. Although we don't like to think about it, it seems that sorrow and suffering are inevitable in human life, even in a happy human life. There's the suffering of loss, of disappointment, of disrespect, the suffering of physical pain, illness, old age, the suffering of broken relationships, of wanting something badly and not being able to have it, or not wanting something but being stuck with it. There's the inevitable suffering of painful, afflictive emotions like jealousy and grief and anger and hatred and confusion and anguish. All kinds of emotions that cause suffering. These things are part of life. No one can avoid suffering. Given that this is so, how can we not take our lives in hand and make a serious effort to develop wisdom, compassion, and resilience? So really contemplating the inevitability of suffering can help us lighten up a little bit, actually, rather than being like, this is so unfair that this is happening to me. This is so unfair that this did happen to me. Instead, we can go, of course, these things happen. These things, different things, variations of suffering that manifests in an infinite number of ways, but it happens to everyone. Absolutely everyone. No one gets away without suffering. Don't need to be too distressed by it. We just can work with it. We can let our suffering be our Dharma gate. Let our suffering be our way to practice more fully, to become a kinder, more respectful, wiser person. We can do that with our suffering. Doesn't matter what the suffering is. Every suffering can be a Dharma gate, without exception. So just to go through from the start again, seeing we had lots of little lists here. So the first of the main points is to resolve to begin. And the slogan that goes with that is to train in the preliminaries. And then the 3 ways that are broken down for training with the preliminaries is to first take stock of your life and take responsibility for where you are right now and all the things that happened that got you to here right now. It's your life. You're the one that breathes, which was a lovely thing that Mark said this morning in our koan class that I've been contemplating. I'm the one that does the breathing. So it doesn't matter if somebody else is at fault, it's my life. I need to take responsibility for it right now. That's where the power lies. And then we also want to have some kind of practice, still practice like zazen, meditation, contemplation, quietly doing something mindfully, like we can be very still mentally while we cook food, for example, or while we do laundry, or even while we drive our car or ride our bike. And then the fourth is to train in these 4 points: the rarity and preciousness of human life, the absolute inevitability of death, the awesome and indelible power of our actions, and the inescapability of suffering. And I'd just like to pay my respects to Norman Fisher. I love his translation, and the way his use of vocabulary is really beautiful, and I would recommend this book. And it's also on Audible and wonderful to listen to because he actually is the one reading the book. So that's really lovely when the author reads themselves. And he's a priest in the Soto lineage of Suzuki Roshi that we're also a part of. All right, so I'll finish there and see if anyone would like to comment or ask a question. I'm just changing it so I can see everyone online. Does anyone like to? Yes, Mark.
This really resonates with me. Sort of when it gets to the heart of why I find myself sitting here today. Quite a few years ago, I found myself climbing onto an operating table, about to have open heart surgery, and I thought, wow, I'm not ready for this. This is, I may not wake up, and I'm not ready to die. I'm not prepared to die. And in that split, it wasn't a split second, in that short time, I resolved that if I did wake up, well then I'd spend the rest of my life preparing much better for my death. And so, yeah, here I am. There was the suffering, there was the Dharma gate, and yeah.
That's wonderful. I'm just going to repeat it again because I think maybe people didn't all hear. Were you able to hear that online? So Mark, I hope you don't mind me paraphrasing.
No, well,
So Mark was just sharing that some years ago he found himself climbing up onto an operating table to have open heart surgery, and he realised that he actually wasn't really prepared. He wasn't prepared to die, possibly die, that he hadn't really prepared. And so he resolved that if he woke up from the surgery, that he would then dedicate the rest of his life to preparing himself. So we're very grateful because now Mark is part of our Sangha. And obviously the surgery worked.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Anyone else like to comment or ask a question? Rain.
Neti, thank you for this wonderful talk. And I love your anecdotes and how joyful and simple they can be. You know, the stories of you contemplating different ways that you could die. I found so inspiring and really so Neti. So thank you so much for that. It's really a lot to take away and contemplate. You're such a Dharma treasure, really. You're just so yourself. It's so inspiring as a priest to hear you, the way that you expound the Dharma. And Mark, thank you for that anecdote as well. Also extremely sobering and inspiring, you know, on a Saturday morning, unexpectedly to hear a story like that. In me, it landed with this real quality of distilling things right back to their essence. So I just had a desire to fortify what you have both said this morning, and the strength that you've brought for all of us by adding the story of my father's death, which was about 5 years ago. And in the last 4 years of his life, he dried out. He stopped drinking, you know, which is an astonishing thing to do and a relatively unusual story that someone of my father's advanced age would just stop drinking like that. So I wanted to share that story because I'm so deeply proud of him and, you know, honored to be his daughter. And also because he very deeply engaged in his spiritual practice for the last 4 years, and in a way that intensified so that he was Catholic. In the last sort of 6 months or so of his life, he was receiving what we call in the Catholic tradition the Eucharist, which is the bread that you receive. Some say symbolically, some say actually to receive, the body of what we call Christ. And you could see in him that some kind of transcendence was taking hold, and that the transformation of his body as it started to sort of leave him, as he started to leave his body in a sort of very gradual way, because he was so deeply engaged in a spiritual practice that he loved very deeply and believed in very deeply, and had daily visits from a priest for the last few weeks, whom he loved. He loved this priest, and they had a beautiful confidence between them. And this priest said to my father, you're in a perpetual state of prayer, and you're ready, you're fully confessed. And my mother, who's a nurse and has nursed many people at the end of their life, said that my father's was the best death that she'd ever seen. And I do remember at the start of my own spiritual practice when I was 23, I did a Goenka retreat, a 10-day retreat, where Goenkaji said, it's known in the Buddhist tradition that if you live a life of practice that you will die well. And I think it's not always the case. Accidents happen and, you have your unfinished karma, but I do think that Zen practice prepares us to die, and that spiritual practice prepares us to die, and that to live soberly with the knowledge of this is a really beautiful way to live. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rain. We have time for one more comment or question. Yes, Jamal?
Slightly different track. I felt very aligned with what you were saying earlier in the talk around the kind of. I've often perceived Buddhism to be a little anthropocentric, human focused, and prioritizing human life over all other forms of life. To me, at least, seemingly on the basis of this idea that human beings have the capacity for self-awareness in a way that maybe other beings may not. And yeah, I think like you, that's never really sat well with me. It's never been something I've felt entirely comfortable with. That kind of, I think the consequences of a pure prioritization of human life over all other forms leads to lots of the negative outcomes, which we're kind of seeing now. I guess the question here is, is that inherent in Buddhism? Like, is this idea that human life is more important than other life forms? Is that just a way that Buddhism sees things, or are there other interpretations of Buddhism that maybe take different angles on that?
Yeah. I'll rephrase. So the question that Jamal's asking is, does Buddhism really see that there is something superior about being born in the human form? Are humans somehow better than other species? And obviously, if we thought that was truly true, that would be very problematic. But I think people often maybe do interpret it that way. But actually, just from this particular reading with Norman Fisher, I feel like it's reopened or helped strengthen the view. It's not that we're in any way better, but we have this sort of capacity to make choices about what we do, and we can impact the environment in ways that other species don't as much. It's not as if it's just all or nothing, because we know that now, that other species do have even have burial rituals and various things. We're not the only species, but we do have this particular capacity to have an impact and to choose our impact, and in that sense, it's extremely precious. It's a bit like if there was one person who could make the decision for thousands of people, and they couldn't, but this one person could. That person's very precious. What are they going to do with that power that they have? Are they going to use it well or use it badly? So I think more that's really, I think the way the teaching should be understood, that we have this capacity, and here we are happen to be human, so what are we going to do with it? And I like the traditional sense of humans are custodians, and it's not a patronising thing. It's just that we can alter the environment in really dramatic ways. So we want to be good custodians, as I think is really our birthright, and is really what we're born to do. I think our ancestors did this for tens of thousands of years. It's really only this very recent part of history that we've gone, not even everybody, of course, lots of people are living still harmoniously on the land. But we are, for whatever reason, in an economic and social system that's functioning outside of the ecological capacity of the earth. So rather than tilting towards humans are a blight on the landscape, which is definitely where some people go, and I think that's a very unhelpful way to think about it, and very disrespectful to all the humans who do great, wonderful things for the earth. So rather, we are precious, and what are we going to do with these precious hands and this precious brain? What are we going to do? Does that make sense? All right. So we're going to finish. We're going to do a short chant and then some bowing, and then we're finishing for the day. I'll just turn the recording off.